pronto. Right. So I wanted to continue with. I wanted to go through another round of the same meditation we did last Saturday. Give everybody a chance to try to get a little bit more feeling for that on the wisdom practice of the what's known as the emptiness of the self, and try to step into that. But I wanted to offer another aid, another help along the way, which is we've been putting a lot of energy into breathing meditation. That's been the main thing that I've been teaching as the preliminary. It's the best way to get started, just because it's everybody. If you're qualified to attend a class, you're still breathing. So it's one of those universal things, equalizers. And so, but what is the breathing, right? It's just some movement, some change in our physical body, helps to get us out of our head a little bit, helps us to quiet some of the talking and focus on something that we can that's there, that we know we can latch on to. So if our mind gets distracted, we can bring it back. But breathing is not the only thing that we can latch on to. There is this is a practice that I was reminded of just last week, and so it was fresh on my mind. There are inner sounds or subtle sounds that arise when we become more quiet, and this is sometimes referred to as a nada, or a sound, an inner sound, not the Spanish word nothing, but there's a Sanskrit word nada, which means like inner sound. But if you think about, if you're quiet in your house these days, you probably have some electric motor running, like your refrigerator. There's a little quiet buzzing noise, or even the sound of a little electric charger or transformer makes a little buzzing noise. But if we're quiet as well, there's an inner buzzing noise as well, this like slight ringing maybe in our ears, or slight buzzing, but maybe also a slight buzzing in our skin, in our body, like just some low level energy, you could say, or low level. I mean, it sounds a little hippie, right? Energy and vibration, but if I ground it in your refrigerator, it sounds a little bit more grounded, right? But there's some low level. It is just, we're alive. Like your refrigerator's on, therefore there's a little bit of noise in life. You're alive, therefore there's a little bit of noise in life. And if you strip away all of the inner talking and chatter and movement and so forth, then there is this, I guess I'll have to say, the sound of silence. So this sound of silence. Now, if you actually go on a silent retreat for, a day or a week or a month or something like that, then that sound of silence becomes stronger in your awareness. And because it's kind of and when I say sound, it just means that it's something you can sense maybe with your ears, or there is a physical awareness of some like level of quiet buzzing, one way or another. Because it's something that's physical but subtle, it makes it a little easier for our mind to latch onto it, just like the breath. Because it's a physical thing, you can kind of latch onto it. This sound of silence, so to speak, is a physical thing, so you can kind of latch onto it a little bit more easily than you can latch onto just the complete absence of something. So in the meditation last week, I was guiding us through, the absence of the self that we normally see, or the absence of the self that we normally think we are. And it's a little bit tricky to just focus on an absence. Our mind tends to fill that gap. Nature abhors a vacuum, right? Our mind tends to fill that gap with thinking or other distractions. So what we can do is just spend a little bit of time up front trying to tap into that sound of silence, so to speak, however we experience it. And then I'll guide us through that meditation on the emptiness of ourself, but we can anchor that absence of the self that we normally see, the absence of the self that is at the center of all of our problems. We can ground that with this awareness of the sound of silence. We have something that kind of helps us to stay in that quietness. Now, that was a little bit of a complicated explanation up front to get started. Hopefully, guiding you through will give you a better sense. But are you guys, do you have some intuition for what I mean when I say the sound of silence? Okay, that's good. That's good. You guys are quiet people. You kind of enjoy that anyway. So you've got a great head start versus compared to much of the population, I suspect. But so we'll take that sound of silence as our object of focus initially, and that just helps us to quiet the mind. What's interesting, when you focus on something, your mind zooms in on it. Your mind becomes more absorbed. It becomes bigger, larger in your awareness. So when you zoom in, so to speak, on the sound of silence, it becomes more prominent in your awareness, almost louder in your awareness. And so if you do have background noise going on, so that background noise, you think there's underneath that, right? There's always this quiet, like underlying buzzing or sound of silence beneath all of the other activity. And so we can use that to help ground us. Okay, so to enter into our meditation, we can again just find a comfortable position. Taking a deep breath in and out just to reset. Another deep breath, just allowing ourselves to relax. And our object of meditation to begin is the subtle inner sound in our ears or in our body of silence. There is some quiet, subtle ringing or buzzing that underlies all of the other sense awarenesses. So we just spend a bit of time just tapping into that, becoming aware of that negative space. beneath all of the outer sounds and sensations, there is a subtle inner sound, slight ringing in our ears or something we feel inside our body. We focus on this inner sound. We can spend as much time as we like concentrating on this inner sound to increase our mental peace. But for now, we can shift to this meditation on the emptiness of ourself, to begin to unlearn our normal sense of self and use this concentration to assist us. So we engage gently in some contemplation. We ask ourselves, what is on our mind these days? And often there is some problem or challenge. Typically there is some problem or challenge tied into that. Without getting into any of the details, we try to summarize that in one word. What is the challenge? One or two words. What is the challenge we're facing that's on our mind these days? And again, keeping this very simple, we ask, if this is the problem we're facing, the challenge we're facing, what does this imply about ourselves? Who are we? How do we see ourselves such that we are struggling with this situation? We try to boil our sense of ourself down to just one or two words. What is the perception we have of ourself that is at the root of these problems? And we try to make sure that this sense of self really matches who we see ourselves as. If we're struggling with a sense of inadequacy, for example, we just make sure that that really does fit how we see ourselves in the midst of this problem. Try to make sure we're capturing the self we really experience. But then we begin to develop some doubt, skepticism about that version of ourself. We say, is that really who I am? Does everyone see me that way all the time? Am I that way in every situation? And if we are able to recognize that that is not who we always are, not how other people see us, we can recognize that this is just a story that we tell ourselves. A story of who we think we are, the situation we think we're in. And this is a story that we can unlearn so we can relearn a more helpful story. So we imagine that this, bringing to mind this self that is at the root of our problem, this version of ourself at the root of our problem, we just imagine that this self dissolves into light and disappears into empty space. Just like an image on TV that we turn off the TV, or a dream when we wake up. Imagine that version of ourself disappears. And in its absence, there is only the sound of silence. We forget that self we normally think we are. Imagine it disappears and we are left only with this sound of silence, this subtle inner sound. And then we can develop a sense of gratitude for this life that is sustaining us. The root of this subtle inner sound, our life force. Appreciating how incredibly fortunate we are to be alive, have this opportunity to build our wisdom. We can develop the intention to bring our wisdom to its full maturity, its full fruition, so that we can be maximally beneficial for our world. we can open our eyes and arise from our meditation. So this meditation is an example of combining two mental strengths: concentration and wisdom. Or I should use my right hand: concentration, left hand: wisdom. It's often sort of described these sort of left hand, right hand, the wisdom being the left hand, like the less dominant, the sort of hidden, more quiet aspects of things. The right hand, concentration, the strength of mind. And we can tell that we need these together, right? Concentration, this meditation on the sound of silence, or this inner sound, it can bring us a sense of peace. And peace is wonderful. It's amazing, beautiful. If you get a sense of peace, you can bring it with you into your life. You go on vacation, you become more peaceful, you bring that peace back into your regular life, and it radiates out like the warmth of a fire, that peace. But wisdom helps us to solve problems in a very different kind of way. So when we, and by way, wisdom, again, as I said last week, it makes use of our intelligence. And normally our intelligence is highly active, hyperactive, perhaps for modern people. Our intelligence is very tied to, our main intelligence, our conceptual intelligence, is very tied to our speech, right? So we're listening, we're speaking, we're reading, we're writing, and we're thinking, but all of these kind of have this speech energy, we use our intelligence to try to solve our problems. So when I ask you this question, what's on your mind these days, or what's on your mind right now, right? Well, whatever's on your mind is some problem you're trying to solve. Generally, that's what we're using our intelligence for. Figure this out and do this and do that and so forth. But often, so, you know, when people have trouble with their eyes, like they're starting to develop cataracts or floaters or something like that, they see the world as darker or blurrier, or having these floating things in the world, and so forth. So we're like that, but they don't recognize. But initially, you don't realize. Often the change is subtle, and so you don't feel it's coming on, and you don't really recognize that it's necessarily something in your own eyes that's making you see the world that way. But we're very much the same. We're always focused on the outer world, like what's this problem, what's that problem, and so forth. And we're often not aware of, implicit in our view of the outer world is a view of ourself. There's always this, like, there's always this sense of me. I'm struggling with this, I'm struggling with that. But who is that me? Who is that self? It's sort of implicit. But all of these things are a story. You know, the outer world that we're dealing with is a story. The inner self that we're dealing with is a story. And when we're quieting that story, it gives us a chance to unlearn that story and to learn a different or more useful story. Yesterday, my dad called me to request some technical support. I'm on-call technical support for my parents. His phone had gotten into some mode where it was speaking out loud everything that was on the screen for the phone, and he couldn't turn it off, and it wouldn't respond to him touching and so forth. And so he had basically lost control of the phone. And so he called me and said, you know, it's been going on all day. and I hate it. I hate this phone. And I started laughing, and he's like, it's not funny. And I said, oh, it is funny. Anyway, that's my lack of compassion. But it took us a while to work, to figure out what was causing this. And we all have, and so for him, what he was really craving, to bring this back around, what he was really craving was the sound of silence. But as you can tell, the sound of silence means different things in different contexts. Like, why is that silence so, like, silence is all the same stuff, right? But it has different meanings depending on what you were exposed to before. So if your phone's talking to you, you're craving the sound of silence, it has one meaning, right? If there's a lawnmower going on and you are craving the sound of silence, that has a slightly different meaning. So what I'm indicating with this is that the meaning and the impact of this silence and quiet and peace can have different levels of impact depending on what we're coming out of, right? So if the operating system of our mind, so to speak, is always telling us these stories about I'm like this and I'm like that and this person's like this and that person's like that, on a very profound and deep level, we have a sense of who we are. And this sense of who we are is kind of like there's all these knots in it, like I'm like this and I've been like that since I was a little child, and other people are like this and this stuff always happens to me, and we've got all of these stories all kind of knotted up and tied up. So when we're meditating on the emptiness of the self, what we're doing is you could say, untying those knots. We're loosening those knots up on the deepest level. So we're not just getting some temporary peace where we can be peaceful for a few hours. We're really trying to untie this knotted up sense of who we are, right? So, and that's the power of combining this piece of meditation with the wisdom and the insight into untying who we think we are, untangling, so to speak, who we think we are. These concepts and these stories, we have our personal stories, but then we also have our collective stories, right? We also have our social stories. And yesterday, Google Earth unveiled this tool that they had that allows you to sort of go back in time for 37 years and watch how areas of the world have developed over 37 years, sort of a moving picture image of the world, these global satellites. And you can see human civilizations all over the place, sort of eating up the natural world, growing and taking over hills and forests and so forth, and consuming the hills and forests and opening up mines, and then global warming, glaciers receding and so forth. And so it's very powerful to see 37 years of change from that point of view. And all of that is indicating that human society, well, it's nothing new to you, of course, you're well aware of this, but human society has this, it's growing enormously, taking over much of the natural world, but driven very much by these inner conceptions we have of, at the end of the day, why are humans growing? Why are humans expanding? Why are we consuming this and that? What are we doing? Like, what are humans doing, right? At the end of the day, we're also just a life force. We're also just part of nature, right? Human beings. And so when you're listening to that inner sound, that's like the inner energy of your nature. That you could say your human nature, your human life, right? You're alive, you're buzzing, like the sound of insects outside, right? This sort of inner energy buzzing inside. But humans, of course, we've gained a lot of power, and all of this power is sort of wrapped up in our intelligence, and we've got to do this and do that. And and accomplish all of these things. And the scale at which humans are operating, obviously, it looks unsustainable or difficult to sustain in a lot of different ways. But often it's unsustainable even for ourselves. And so this is part of the challenge for modern people, right? Like we struggle to sustain even our own pace, right? So what is sustainability from an outer point of view? Means you're consuming resources no faster than they can be replenished, like wood and water and food and these kinds of things, energy. What is sustainability from an inner point of view? Sustainability from an inner point of view is that you can continue to operate, but not drain your inner reserves of peace, not drain your inner reserves of compassion, of kindness, of a sense of meaning in your life, a sense of connectedness. And these inner reserves that we have, every night when we fall asleep, we sort of, the tank fills up a little bit on our inner peace. We sort of restore and rebalance and so forth. But often as we're going about our daily life, there's a lot of wear and tear, right? There's a lot of stress and struggle and pain and becoming disconnected from the people around us and so forth. So we need to learn ways to move through our life, move through our world without damaging this sense of peace, right? Without damaging this sense of connectedness, without damaging the sense of goodwill towards others. And so this is all of the, all of these teachings that I give, they're all kind of oriented in one way or another towards that, like towards helping us to move through our life in a way that is less damaging to our own peace of mind, like less damaging to our own good relationships with others, less damaging to our own sense of meaning and purpose, and more in tune with this inner energy, right? More in tune with these inner movements, which are like the nature. If you look at these maps of, the world, I guess we stick with Google Maps for a second. Normally, the view of Google Maps that we have shows cities, right, and restaurants, and where your friends live, and and that's the human structure. If you look at that view of the map, everything is made to disappear, except for the cities and roads and restaurants and gas stations, and that's the human view of the world, right? And when you look at that map, that's what you see, right? That's the stuff that seems to be important from that point of view. But if you look at the, say, satellite view, didn't mean to go so deep into this stuff. But anyway, this is something we all have access to these days. If you look at the satellite view, you see all of this green space as it's like the white space or the implicit space underneath this human society that we're all depending on. And in the same way, there's all of the thinking and conceptions and worries and problems that we're normally going through in our daily life. But then if we quiet those a little bit, we can tap into the sort of inner rhythm of our breathing, or this inner sound, or the feeling of our body and so forth. And it's a bit like the natural space, the green space around. We're tapping into our own inner nature. And to be fair, I mean, a lot of societies, traditional societies, had done a wonderful, wonderful job of figuring out how to sustain that inner nature, that inner joy, that inner happiness, and so forth, in the midst of daily life. Right? So traditional religious practices were often for that purpose of helping people to restore, rebuild connection, rebuild a sense of purpose. None of these traditional religions are exactly prepared for the world that we're living in, right? The amount of cultural change and technological change and access to information and so forth. So we're having to kind of reform some understanding of how do we restore this inner balance, this inner happiness and peace and so forth in the midst of all of this information. So this is, if you feel like you're struggling with that, great. You're in good company. Just even recognizing the fact that we're all going through this, right? The whole world is going through this. Just even that knowledge plugs you into everybody else. That's empathy, right? And so just realizing that this is a collective challenge that we're all facing, then this itself is a way of finding meaning and peace. Just sort of seeing that we're all struggling with this together, right? That's a kind of a unifying sense. The word religion, from a Latin re ligare, means bind together, bind people together again, bind together again. Ligare is bind, re is again. So we need to bind ourselves together again with all of humans and nature and our own inner nature, and figure out how to not fall apart, so to speak, not, have our own inner peace so degenerated and disintegrated and fragmented, but figure out how to bond ourselves together, and even just having the compassion and the empathy, knowing that everybody is struggling to find meaning and purpose in this new world. That alone helps us to deepen our sense of meaning. And then this meditation, unlearning who we think we are, unlearning the world, what we think the world is like, unlearning what we think our problems are like, and using this inner energy, this inner peace to help to ground us. All right, so why don't we, I appreciate everybody's comments, obviously stirring up thoughts for all of us. So happy, maybe we have some more discussion in the chat afterwards if you want, but we'll take a few minutes now just to bring this to a conclusion with some final intention. So we can settle in with a deep breath just to reset a little bit, and whatever inspiration has been stirred up in your mind, any thoughts, any insights, and so forth, we can concentrate on this, and we can think, how wonderful if I could stabilize this insight, bring this insight to fruition, and help to share that wisdom with the people around me to the degree that they are open and interested. How wonderful if I could stabilize and deepen my own inner wisdom on these topics and gradually help others. And then with this intention, this determination to continue to build and ripen and mature our wisdom, we can open our eyes and arise from meditation. Okay, so thank you everybody very much. I'm delighted to be able to spend this time with you. Thank you, Eileen, for sharing the nature of your backyard with us to help me feel connected to nature through this talk. And
Michigan. Michigan in April.
Beautiful.
Thank you. I had kept thinking of the word, I don't know, it's not, you said one word, so I made it one word,